afternoon, and thanks for joining us for a special Decision 2014 Election Day edition of KUJH News. I'm Sierra Upton. Polls close in Douglas County at 7 p.m. People have been voting all day across Kansas. KUJH News reporter Thomas Hoppo is live in Free State High School with more on Kansas voters. Thomas?
Thanks, Sierra. So I'm here at Free State High School right now, where doors opened this morning for the voting polls at 7 o'clock. But we spoke with election officials earlier today, and they said that voters were lined up as early as 6:30 this morning. We met with voters from all over Lawrence, from veteran voters to voters voting for the first time in their very first election. No matter which precinct we went to, though, all the election officials were happy with voter turnout.
People did remember on the 4th of November to vote.
This is my first time voting, and I really enjoyed, being able to vote.
Some had goals in today's election.
I think it's good to have have your voice heard. They say, oh, well, why should I vote? It doesn't matter. It does.
While others had roles.
Gene Bean, I'm the election supervisor for Precinct 4.
There's no line.
There are 71 precincts in Douglas counties and some that are smaller than others.
Well, we had a little line this morning.
But still with surprising numbers.
Right now we've had 110 voters. And for this precinct, that's pretty good.
Free State High School's precinct is a different story.
Very good turnout here. We had people in line around the corner before 7 o'clock this morning.
And voters waited patiently in these lines, even this first-time voter in the wrong line.
I didn't know anything about a precinct or whatever. Yeah, I guess you have to vote closest one to your house.
Polls close at 7. Elections officials will still be here.
When can you go home?
When can I go? When we're done, which will probably be 8:30 or 9.
So again, polls close 7 o'clock tonight, so voters still have a few hours to cast in their votes. As you can see right now, voters are still piling up behind me, waiting for their turn to cast in their votes. So earlier today, when we spoke with election officials, the votes at 1 o'clock was close here at this precinct to 300 votes. Now, a couple hours later, it's close to 500 votes. So the number's only going to keep growing. For KUJH News, I'm Thomas Hoppo.
Thanks, Thomas. To avoid long lines on Election Day, about 10,000 Douglas County residents cast their ballots early in advanced voting. That's 13.7% of registered voters. Douglas County Clerk Jamie Shue says he saw heavy turnout. The numbers are higher than the turnout numbers for the 2010 and 2006 midterms. In fact, they neared the type of numbers he sees in advanced voting during presidential election years. He says the gubernatorial race was a big reason.
There's been a lot of advertising and the campaigns have been really active. When you have the campaigns really active and you have people feeling like this election is really, really important is when you get a lot of people turning out who don't normally turn out an election this size.
Kansas, about 230,000 people cast advanced ballots. That's about 13% of all registered voters. For weeks, a group of students worked to turn out the vote here at KU. Reporter Kaylee Taylor had a chance to follow them around for a day. She's live in the newsroom to tell us about their campaign. Kaylee?
Thanks, Sierra. It's no secret that college students are typically the lowest group to turn out for elections. And even with education as a big issue on the ballot this year, predictions for a turnout, young voters, is low. In the 2012 election, only 19% of all voters in the age group 18 and 29, and it's likely to drop for this midterm election.
With college students' voter turnout so low, organizations on campus are taking it into their own hands to get students to the polls. The nonpartisan group Future Majority, along with other organizations, have tabled, texted, and everything in between to make sure as many people vote as possible. Spending many days on Wesco Beach and at the Union, Rock Chalk the Vote tried to make a difference registering new voters, calling suspended voters, and texting registered voters to make sure they knew when to vote.
We've identified the voters in the area around KU, so all of our peers age-wise in Douglas County. We have a list of them. There's like thousands. We're going to try and contact as many as we can.
Future Majority hopes through technology and social media they can reach more young voters.
We're doing everything we can to get the word out and to encourage students to cast their ballot this election day.
Gress says a big reason why so many students don't vote is because the process can be confusing.
Well, this year I think it's because it's pretty inconvenient. We are doing everything we can to make it easy for students, but a lot of it is that they just don't know and they don't necessarily have somebody pushing the information to them.
According to the Washington Post, polls can also misrepresent what the young generation really cares about. While it may appear many students care about global warming, in reality, they care more about unemployment and the economy.
Rock Chalk the Vote will be at voting stations today, making sure students aren't having difficulty voting. I'm Kaylee Taylor, live in the newsroom.
Polls are still open for about 3 hours in Douglas County. Coming up, more on the candidates vying to represent you.
You need to vote, or else someone will speak for you, and it will be your government, no matter if you consented to it or not.
Plus, 2 measures are also printed on Douglas County ballots. We'll look into the questions that could affect your wallet. You're watching Decision 2014 on KUJH News. Stay with us.
Politics and Washington specifically is completely broken.
This is a really critical year for voting.
The influence that our one state could have at the national level and the national debate is huge.
Welcome back to a special Decision 2014 edition of KUJH News on this election day. Now let's break down the races and issues on the ballot here in Douglas County. To do this, we talked with students from KU's Young Democrats, College Republicans, College Independents, and Young Americans for Liberty chapters. We'll begin with the tight race for Kansas governor. Incumbent Republican Governor Sam Brownback has 2 opponents, Democrat Paul Davis and Libertarian Keen Umber. Brownback has been in office since 2011. Previously, he served 2 terms as a U.S. Senator. Davis is a Kansas state representative and the current Kansas House Minority Leader. He represents the 46th District, which serves KU. He is also a lawyer. Umber is a lawyer originally from Great Bend, Kansas.
When he takes office, he's really hoping to restore the cuts that have been made to public education and to restore our tax policy to one that's a lot more fair for all Kansans.
Sam Brownback stands to create an environment where we can grow the Kansas economy by lowering taxes and attracting businesses. He's also an advocate for investing in education, particularly technical schools.
Completely renovating the K-12 system and making sure that it's funded appropriately and properly. Open transparency within the government and itself.
One of Kansas's U.S. senators is up for re-election this year. 3-term Republican Senator Pat Roberts has 2 challengers, independent candidate Greg Orman and Libertarian Randall Batson. Roberts has been in Congress since 1980. He was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1996. He also served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 4 years. Orman is an Olathe businessman. He is an independent who hasn't said whether he'd vote with Republicans or Democrats in the Senate if elected. Batson is a quality assurance inspector at a manufacturing facility in Wichita. He previously served in the Navy and worked as a technician.
Fiscally responsible and socially tolerant Greg Orman, who is a businessman and not a politician, and who has been trying to put Kansas values ahead of politics.
He also opposes Obamacare because he believes that the doctor-patient relationship should be kept just between the doctor and the patient without government interference.
One of his primary goals is to help reduce military spending, something that the rest of Congress fails to touch on. And he would certainly reform the marijuana laws in the state of Kansas.
KU is part of Kansas's 2nd congressional district for the U.S. House of Representatives. Republican Lynn Jenkins has held that seat since 2009. Before that, she was a certified public accountant. She's been challenged this year by Democrat Margie Wakefield and Libertarian Chris Clemens. Wakefield is a lawyer from Lawrence. She's also immediate past chair of the Douglas County Democratic Party and the 2nd Congressional District Caucus. Clemens is a science teacher in Kansas City, Kansas. He's challenging Jenkins because of frustration over the increasing divide in Congress.
She wants to get elected so that we can find bipartisan solutions for problems that we're all facing, things like education and energy policy that we're simply butting heads on right now without getting anything done.
Over half the bills she's authored have been co-sponsored by Democrats. She also opposes tax increases and is for the balanced budget amendment as well. She's for limited government and has actually been a big advocate for college savings plans.
We're working on drug reform, and his basis for that is that it would help Kansas farmers and the agricultural industry here in Kansas to foster a better economy here, and then also to reduce the income tax.
In the Kansas House, the KU campus is divided into two districts, the 44th and 46th. It's represented by Barbara Ballard in the 44th district. She's running unopposed this election. The 46th district seat is currently held by Paul Davis. He's giving up his spot to run for governor. Democrat Dennis Boog Heiberger and Republican Douglas Robinson are running for the open seat. Heiberger is an attorney and former Lawrence mayor and city commissioner. Robinson has a degree in broadcast communications from San Francisco State University. This is his first time running for office.
Boog is a really strong advocate, once again, of public education because that's one of the biggest issues we have in this race. He's really going to make sure that, once again, we're working across party lines to get things done.
He believes in the importance of the Constitution as well as the dignity and equality of every person. He believes that all people are created by God and should be treated that way.
The Kansas Secretary of State has electoral, economic, and administrative responsibilities. Incumbent Republican Chris Kobach faces Democratic challenger Gene Schodorf. Kobach took office in 2011. Previously, he was a constitutional law professor and litigator. Schodorf is a former Kansas State Senator. She works as a speech and language pathologist in Wichita. She also served on the Wichita School Board for 12 years.
Gene wants to make sure that we're streamlining the voting process to make it easier and more understandable for Kansans and really just get us back on track.
He's a big supporter of the Second Amendment as well as government transparency and business regulation. He's also for the voter ID laws and proof of citizenship to try to stop voter fraud.
The Kansas Attorney General is the state's chief legal officer and law enforcement official. Republican incumbent Derek Schmidt is running against Democrat A.J. KUJH. Schmidt has been in office since 2011. He previously served as a state senator and counsel to the governor. KUJH has been chief counsel in the Kansas Departments of Labor and Administration. He also served as special assistant under state attorney generals for over 25 years.
He particularly advocates against fraud against seniors and against scams against consumers, as well as protecting the public from violent crime.
Bodenheimer declined to comment on KUJH. She says she doesn't support his approval of she doesn't approve his approval of Kansas's same-sex marriage ban. The Kansas Insurance Department reviews insurance companies in the state. The seat for commissioner is open. Current Kansas Insurance Commissioner Sandy Prager isn't seeking a fourth term. She's butted heads with Governor Brownback over health care. Some view this as the reason she's not running for a fourth term. Two candidates are running, Democrat Dennis Anderson and Republican Ken Selzer. Anderson has more than 30 years of experience in insurance. Prager, a Republican, endorsed him for her seat. Selzer is a certified public accountant who has worked in the reinsurance industry.
He sees the mess that's being caused by CanCare and the Medicaid expansion issue, and he wants to make sure that we're working and finding out what's actually best for Kansans health care instead of what's maybe best for special interests.
He's for cutting bureaucratic red tape to make it easier to get insurance, which also makes it cheaper for consumers.
One of the two questions on the ballot Lawrence voters are answering today. Should the city of Lawrence increase the sales tax 0.2% to help fund a new facility for the Lawrence Police Department? The new facility would consolidate the department's operations in one building to improve efficiency. The building would go on land close to I-70, currently owned by Hallmark Cards. The estimated costs for the building are $25.7 million. Taxpayers would pay for it if this sales tax passes, and Lawrence City Commissioners voted last week to offset some of the costs for the facility by selling surplus land on the Hallmark Cards property. The sales tax would be effective for at most 9 years. The revenue would only be used to fund the new police facility. The second question on the ballot: should raffles be legal for charities in Kansas? The topic's been overshadowed by other issues but remains a concern for nonprofit organizations in Lawrence.
Any form of lottery is illegal for nonprofits in Kansas. Raffles are considered a type of lottery. Longtime Lawrence resident Thomas Bryce doesn't like the idea of gambling.
I understand the idea of making the money and putting it to good use, but I don't think it's right to put people's lives, their emotions, their livelihoods at risk for someone to profit.
Kate Meggy moved from Illinois in August to run the Lawrence Humane Society. She says raffles only make up a modest part of nonprofit fundraising, so changing the law would benefit smaller organizations the most.
It would be really nice if it were official and legitimate, because it's a great way to raise money for some of our smaller organizations. A lot of us depend on the $5 and $10 donations.
Meggy wanted to hold a raffle in August, but was surprised to learn that was illegal.
The last raffle we did in Champaign for the synagogue that I was with made a lot of money. We raffled off an iPad, we raffled off, cash prizes. It's a great way to raise money for a good cause.
Bryce says he's concerned the amendment would lead to looser gambling laws.
It's one thing to raffle off a quilt or something for charity or whatever, but it seems like if you open the door for that, then you really can't close the door on other things.
Kansas Senate and House passed the amendment last spring, giving voters the final say. Meggy's already planning her next move if the amendment passes.
I would love to do a photo contest. We could vote on it, or raffle off for the cutest pictures. There are so many options we could do. I have tons of ideas.
The amendment still wouldn't allow these nonprofits to work with professional lottery companies or use electronic gambling machines.
If a majority of Kansans vote yes, lawmakers will meet during the next legislative session and regulate these raffles. It's likely these changes will not go into effect until the summer of next year. As the hours count down to polls closing, the nation's eyes are on Kansas voters in two tight races.
Why would Republicans abandon Sam Brownback and Pat Roberts and at least consider alternatives?
The reason how Kansans decide to color the map tonight is garnering national attention. When Decision 2014 on KUJH News continues.
Extraordinarily competitive, perhaps the most competitive races in the country.
This November, Kansas holds a title it can rarely claim, Battleground State. Welcome back to the KUJH News Decision 2014 special. Kansas is one of the most Republican states in the country. Nearly twice as many Kansas voters are registered Republican than Democrat. Republicans hold all statewide offices and all 4 congressional seats, and the GOP controls both houses of the state legislature. Yet, Republican incumbents find themselves locked in tight political battles.
Chris Kobach, Sam Brownback, and Pat Roberts are extraordinarily big figures in the Kansas Republican Party for different reasons. They're all in trouble. And so I think people are trying to pay attention to see how that all plays out.
And Kansans aren't the only ones paying attention to the Sunflower State's political climate. One reason, the United States Senate. Who Kansans elect to the Senate could be the deciding vote over which party controls the governmental body. Nationally, Senate seats in 10 states, including Kansas, are toss-ups. To control the Senate, Republicans need a 51-senator majority. Democrats need 50 because Vice President Joe Biden would break a tie in their favor. The last vote could come down to Kansas's decision between Republican incumbent Pat Roberts and independent challenger Greg Orman. Orman hasn't said who he would vote with if elected.
If there's the precise math leads Republicans with 50 and Democrats with 49, he could literally determine which party controls the U.S. Senate, and that's another reason why a lot of people are keeping their eye on Kansas.
Voter turnout is important in every election, but this year, some races could be decided by a couple of votes. KU political science professor Burdette Loomis says it's crucial to get voters who don't usually vote in off-year elections to head to the polls. Loomis says Republicans are trying to turn out as many voters from their own side as possible. Candidates like Democrat Paul Davis, who's running for governor, are campaigning toward the middle. Independent U.S. Senate candidate Greg Orman, who doesn't have a political party, is relying on Democrats who go to the polls for Davis to also check his name.
I think that because there are so many people who don't vote, that the idea of getting that extra vote out, or 1 vote or 2 votes or 5 votes or whatever per precinct is really important. And particularly in the Roberts-Orman race, that kind of turnout may spell the difference.
Secretary of State Chris KUJH predicts half the state's 1.7 million registered voters will vote in this election. Loomis says that's about right for an off-year election. The most recent polls suggest the Kansas governor and U.S. Senate races remain toss-ups. Public Policy Polling released its final poll Monday. In it, Democrat Paul Davis leads Republican Governor Sam Brownback by 1 percentage point, 46 to 45%. Libertarian challenger Keen Umber received 4%, and 4% were undecided. KU political science assistant professor Patrick Miller says Davis will win.
I think he'll win by a few points. No landslide, but at this point, Governor Brownback needs the polls to be wrong in order to really pull off a victory.
Looking at the U.S. Senate race from that same poll, independent candidate Greg Orman leads incumbent Republican Senator Pat Roberts 47 to 46%. Libertarian Randall Batson received 3% of the votes, and 4% of voters are undecided. Miller says the Senate race is a true toss-up.
I would say probably a slim chance of an Orman victory, but I could easily see that flipping to Roberts with a good get-out-the-vote effort.
Polls close in eastern Kansas at 7 p.m. They close in the western half of the state at 8 p.m. Central Time. KUJH will go live every hour starting at 7 to bring you the latest Douglas County and Kansas voter returns. We'll also go live to candidate watch parties. Coverage continues in a few hours right here on KUJH. That does it for this special decision 2014 edition of KUJH News. For all of us here at KUJH TV, I'm Sierra Upton. We'll see you back here at 7.